Hey guys, hope you're all doing well today. Just wanted to bring you this video is kind of a recap of sorts over the Bowazon builds that I've showcased on my YouTube channel over the last few weeks and months. Before I jump into everything, I just wanted to give a couple of thanks out to the community. So first off, just wanted to thank the viewers and subscribers for this channel. We recently hit 200 subscribers for this channel last week. So I'm pretty rapt that there's this much interest and support for Bowazon content out there. So thank you guys for showing your enthusiasm and support. Secondly, I want to give a thanks to Alzarath in particular for actually plugging one of my videos and this YouTube channel in one of his posts recently. We got an influx of viewers and subscribers from that post as well. So just wanted to give a thanks out to Alzarath for that one because he really didn't have to do that, and really wasn't expecting it at all. And lastly, I actually started playing online recently. I've got a Bowls build that I'm rocking at the moment. She's like, what is it, level 87 or something like that, and she's actually quite geared up at the moment. So I wanted to give thanks to a couple of people out there. I won't name them, but they've actually provided quite a lot of gear for me to actually get started fairly quickly. So thank you guys for doing that. I hope I can repay you sooner or later. We'll see what happens. So anyway, on screen here, you can actually see there's 16 builds in, let's just call this bracket 1, and then we've got another 3 builds in bracket 2. The reason why I've separated these out is because I've classified these as your let's just say expensive but attainable builds. So they're builds that you could probably attain after 6 months to a year of solid play for Diablo 2 Resurrected. I've then got these builds down here, which they've got some minor gear changes, but the gear happens to be really, really rare. So let's just call this our mythical slash theoretical type builds that will still be fun to run anyway, just to see how much better they perform compared to all the other ones. But they're not going to be a realistic builds. What I want to do now is actually just run through the format on how things are going to work. So firstly, I want to actually do testing of these builds. Now there's a patch that's coming up, 2.4. Blizzard said it's going to be released mid-April or so. They've given specific dates for this as well as later. So I actually want to wait until that goes live before we commence any testing. Otherwise, the test results are quickly going to become irrelevant. So just waiting for that date to click through before we start testing. So we've got brackets 1 and 2 that are going to be tested. So once again, this is bracket 1 here and bracket 2 down here. To show you the builds, just as an example, we've got this Faith Grand Matron Bow build set up here. This is in bracket 1. So apart from the bow being different, everything else is going to be largely the same. So we're going to be using Cat's Eye, going to be using some kind of circlet here, Fortitude, War Traveler, Ravenfrost, Noscoil or Razortail, depending on what suits a build better. Some kind of Leech Ring or Stat Ring, depending on what stats are missing from the build to try to compensate for it. And then Lava Gouts here. We've then got our very expensive charms, max damage and faster run walk, Annihilus, and the torch as well. So for bracket 1, we've got this format running here. I'll just go through them shortly, but I've actually split it out into 2 different versions. So we've got the version where we've got the max damages on all these charms in the circlet. I actually want to do a run through without those max damages from here and max damage from here or enhanced damage from here, just to kind of show something that's a bit more sort of casual or more realistically attainable for a lot more of the player base out there. But also by having the max damages and enhanced damage stripped out from here, we can actually test the builds, test the bows without having heavy support from the charms and things like that. So we can actually see how the bows themselves perform a little bit better. So in terms of how the format will run, we're going to be doing players 1 runs for all of the builds listed on the spreadsheet here. It's going to be 7 runs each, and average times recorded over those seven runs uh, for each build. Once all of the testing is done for that one, we're then going to list out the times in order from fastest to slowest. And then we're going to take the fastest 10 and do players 8 runs for those. We'll do 5 runs each, and then we'll record the average times for those, and once again sort them by fastest to slowest. I'll upload a video for each run type and bow combination. So expect to see roughly about, let's say 25 videos I'm estimating for that one. We're then going to repeat the same process without the max damage and enhanced damage from the charms and the circlet here. So once again, we're going to be doing 7 runs each and then record the average times. Of the fastest 10, we're then going to do players 5 runs each, and then record the average times. And then videos will be uploaded for those as well. The videos that will be uploaded will be the fastest run or the cleanest run. And then finally, for the second bracket, which is the 3 builds down here, we're just going to be doing players 1, 7 runs each, record average time, and then players 8, 5 runs and record the average times for those. And then we can actually compare how they performed against the bracket 1 builds as well, just to see how much better they do, because I'm assuming they will do better. And then the videos will be uploaded for those as well. Once all of the testing is done, we'll then do rankings and some kind of tier grading system for those. And I'll actually then cover videos of each particular build and cover the pros and cons of taking into account as many factors as possible when making those videos. So after all covering all of that, what I'm then going to do is actually just go into each individual build here. You can see I've actually got the increased attack speed frames here, as well as what the projected damages and DPS values will be for multi-shot once we go into 2.4. This is assuming that guided arrow is maxed on these builds as well, which they are. I've gone through all these builds and made sure that guided arrow is maxed out, multi-shot is around level 20 or so, penetrate is up to a certain level, such that we've got 15,000 plus attack rating, highest pierce numbers as possible depending on the build. If we're using Razor Tail, then we're trying to hit level 9 pierce to get that 100%. High critical strike values and stat points heavily geared towards dexterity, so you can see no points in vitality whatsoever. So all of the builds will follow that kind of approach. So if we go through one by one, we'll start from the top. Actually, before we cover the top ones, we'll actually do these builds down here because they're the most obvious ones. Actually, I'll take a step back. What we're actually going to do from here as well is I'm also going to put my predictions on how these builds are going to perform. So this is before any extensive testing is done. I'm going to say, for example, like this might be S plus, and I've just created a special S plus category just for these ones here. All of these other ones are going to be graded from S to F tier. So I've put these as S plus really because they're highly optimized builds that are pretty much theoretically the best builds you can make for your Bowazon. So anyway, starting from the top here, we've got the Faith Grand Matron Bow build. So jumping into here, you can see what Faith looks like. Now, the best thing about Faith is you pretty much don't need any attack rating for this one whatsoever, or rather, the bow provides you with all of the attack rating that you'll ever need for the build. Not to mention, it's got fanaticism as well as ignore target defense as well. So you're pretty much going to hit everything 95% of the time. So we've got no base points in penetrate other than the prerequisite here. However, because we can't use Razor Tail for this build, because in order to reach a max attack speed, we need to get 20 here, 45 here, 20 here, and then 10 attack speed here to reach the full attack speed. So because we're not using Razor Tail, we have to max out Pierce as high as possible to get approaching to 100% Pierce as much as we can. So I just wanted to cover that as an example of like a rationale for why I structured these builds this way. I'll actually just cover these builds fairly quickly. I don't want to go into too much detail since I'll go into detail a little bit later on once all of the testing is done anyway. So for this one, it's got the highest DPS numbers out of all of the builds, at least in this bracket anyway. It's going to have a hard time getting 100% Pierso, so that's one of the drawbacks, but also the gear flexibility is not quite there as well, because as you saw, the gear has to be fairly structured. You have to have all this attack speed gear in these slots, and they have to be maxed out. However, despite that, it's going to be an S tier build for this one. For the next one, we've got the Faith Matriarchal Bow. This one is essentially the same as a Grand Matron Bow, except for those that know, Matriarchal Bows don't do as much damage. However, they're able to reach the maximum attack speed a lot easier, and so therefore they're going to have more gear flexibility. So for example, with a Grand Matron Bow, you need to have 95% increased attack speed with the Faith, whereas Matriarchal Bows, you need to have 45%. And then Diamond Bows, Shadow Bows, they sort of sit in the middle at around 65%. So Matriarchal Bow with 45% increased attack speed will kind of look like this. So we've got 15 here, 20 and 20 here, and using the Razor Tail here, which then allows us to only put 3 points into this skill to get level 9. And then so we can more freely place skill points into other areas here if we wanted to, so get a higher Valkyrie. But more importantly, it allows us to have a lot more gear flexibility, so we can add max damage here, or if we were to fight Bale, then we can use G-Face or Gore Riders, for example, or decide to switch out this one for, let's say, Atmoscarab, for example, and get a little bit more attack speed here. So we've got plenty more options. However, I think overall, well, obviously it does less damage, but I think the drawbacks from the Faith Grand Matron Bow aren't that big. That I think the damage numbers for that one is a bit more valuable than having slightly less damage but more flexibility. Despite that though, I still think it's an S plus with this one having a bit of an advantage. For Windforce and Faith, this one has been kind of spruiked as being the best build by a lot of people out there commenting on forums and YouTube comments on various Bowazon videos. There's one major drawback with this build, however, is that when the Faith is on your Mercenary, the Fanaticism aura has only got 16.6 yard radius. I can actually show you that right now. So I'll close that, and actually I'll just go in here. You can see it's got 16.6 radius. So what actually tends to happen is once you've cleared a particular pack, let's say in the cow level, cleared out some cows, you're going to the next pack. You'll then run towards the next pack, but leave your mercenary behind. And there'll be a bit of time before she realizes that she needs to catch up. So she'll then start to run towards you again. However, during that window, you're actually not going to have fanaticism effective on you. So by the time you reach the next pack and start shooting, you're probably not going to have that aura attached to you for about 2 seconds. So maybe 6 multi-shot volleys, or I don't know the exact number. But you're basically just using a naked wind force without the fanaticism. But it also doesn't do as much damage as the Grand Matron Bow setup as well. However, it's still a fairly solid setup. So I would actually give it an A. For Wind Force as well, it's also got damage per character level as well. So if you're like level 75, it's not going to do as much damage as this Faith setup here either as well, or this much damage here, because the damage is continuously progressively going up. For Wind Force and Pride, we're basically just replacing the Act 1 mercenary with the Pride and Might mercenary. So this one, you're going to be shooting slower because of that, because you don't have fanaticism. But at the same time, you're going to do a lot more damage, and this build really hits like a truck. You can see 5,800 average multi-shot damage versus 4,700. There's going to be more attack rating issues with this build, but I think after you hit level 95 plus, those problems will slowly sort of fade away anyway. So I would still give this one an S for that one. Witch Wild Strings. This one is kind of a funky bow, but it's a pretty cool bow. I'll just bring it up over here. So I'll just show you the stats real quick. So it's got amplified damage. It's got 2 sockets. So I've got 40-15 joules in there. So it's got 30% increased attack speed in total. It's got 99% deadly strike, and it's got 40% all resistances as well. So all that's pretty cool. And then lastly, it fires magic arrow. So basically, you've got a free critical strike, you've got a free magic arrow. So you've got a lot of skill point flexibility, but 99% deadly strike means you're doubling your damage each and every hit that you do. It does, however, lack raw damage on it, even though it's got pretty consistent damage. So it's got a very high min damage as well. But the damage is kind of not there compared to all the other builds. So I'm going to give this one a B just because of that. It does have amplified damage, but if you're multi-shotting, amplified damage doesn't really go off all that often enough to really justify it too much, but it's a very good strafer bow. Gold Strike Arch. I'll bring the build up here. So it does a lot less damage than Wind Force, but it does have decent attack speed and attack rating bonuses, and these damage versus demon and undead. One of the major drawbacks for this bow, however, is that the Fist of Heaven's proc. So whenever that goes off, there's like a 2% chance or something like that. I can just double check real quick. 5% chance, okay. So 5% chance when Fist of Heavens goes off, there's actually a small window where you can't actually shoot multi-shot. So it actually lowers your DPS. So the damage values here is going to be smaller than it appears. So it's actually quite unfortunate. Also, it's a skill point heavy type of build, and it doesn't have much other stats going for it. So I would still give this one. I'm actually leaning towards a C for this one because the damage is not that high. Breezer, this is your mega hitting crossbow here, and it's got 95% increased attack speed as well, including the dual. And most importantly, it's actually a very cheap crossbow to get, so you can find it in Nightmare, just like Gold Strike Arch. But it's got damage that's on par with Wind Force, or does better damage than Wind Force. Just because it's a crossbow, it's going to shoot a lot slower. But I think for something that you can find in Nightmare, I think it's a pretty solid B. It's also got 100% Pierce as well as kind of a bonus, so you can actually see that we haven't put any points into Pierce, and we're using Nosferatu's Coil as well. Next, we've got Breath of the Dying Colossus Crossbow. For this one here, it's also got a lot of damage as well. Not quite as much as your Breezer, however. Otherwise, it's still pretty good. Having said that, though, it is an expensive one because it requires a Zod and a Vex to make this one. So I think taking into account the expense and slightly lower damage, I would say that this one is probably still a B tier, just because the damage is fairly close. One of the major drawbacks for this one, however, as well, is it's got that Poison Nova proc. So if say you're killing a whole pack of cows and it's got that 50% chance, let me just double check that actually. 50% chance to cast level 20 Poison Nova. So let's say you kill 30 cows on screen and they all sort of die simultaneously. You're going to have a whole bunch of Poison Novas go off and it's going to blind your vision a little bit. So I find that quite annoying. I don't know if it's enough to sort of notch this down to a C, but let's just say it's a bottom end of the B scale in for that one. Next, we've got Mavina's set. This is the only build that's going to be distinctly different from everything else because it is a set. So it is stuck with having to use these 5 set pieces here. The damage is actually quite low on this one, unfortunately, even though it's a Grand Matron bow. And we also can't have max damage quite extensively here. And we're also stuck with this armor as well, which is not as fast as like your Archon place and whatever, because it's a Kraken shell. We also don't have attack speed here. So there's a lot of stuff with this set that's, well, let's just say kind of lacking in a lot of areas, but it's got a lot of stuff like all resistance and all that sort of thing. So it's good to kind of get you started and it's cheap enough to get started on that one as well. I still think it's a C tier build just because the damage numbers are quite low. As an added bonus for this set, the set does look quite cool when you equip it, and it can be used quite well for hybrid zons or mage zons as well because it's got a lot of plus skills. Next, we've got Hellrack, which is just another crossbow. Hellrack here, we've actually got 373 damage, so it doesn't even go into the 400 damage range for crossbows, let alone 500. So damage wise, it's really not up there as well. And attack speed wise, you can see it's not as fast as Breath of the Dying or Breeza either. The only redeeming factors for this is the elemental damage and the attack rating bonus, but otherwise, I'm going to put this one in a C. Next, we've got Breath of the Dying Crusader Bow. It's pretty much going to be similar as the Colossus Crossbow, except it shoots faster, but does a little bit less damage. So DPS numbers are by and large going to be the same. I think we can't go wrong if we also set that one as a B tier build as well. Eaglehorn. Actually, before going to Eaglehorn, I'll just quickly show you this one here, just to show you this is what the damage it does. Now, yeah, 77 to 324. Now we've got Eaglehorn here, which is similar damage to Breath of the Dying Crusader Bow, except it doesn't have all of the supporting stats such as Dual Leech and all of the attribute bonuses. It does have a lot of attack rating bonuses here and ignore target defense, but sadly it's also lacking attack speed naturally on the bow as well. So the attack speed here is coming from the dual. So it's basically a poor man's wind force. It's also got that damage scaling per level, so you're not going to be doing the max damage at level 70 the same as you would if you're level 99. So I think this easily falls into a C tier bow. It is kind of cheap, but then I don't think it's as cheap as Breeza, or I mean, you never know. Then we've got Lysander's Aim, which I think it's on the similar damage scales as Eaglehorn, except it's got that attack speed bonus a little bit. It's got the plus skills a lot more and the mana leech. I do think it's slightly better than Eaglehorn just because it doesn't have that per character level damage scaling on it. It's got the plus skills, which are quite handy as well. It just doesn't have that attack rating / ignore target defense. So I think in the balance of it, they're both going to be CT builds. Can't see them deviating too much from each other. Next, we've got Brand. So this is a rune word made in a matriarchal bow. So because it's a matriarchal bow, does a lot less damage. Now you could make this in a grand matron bow, but then you're going to be shooting a little bit slower. So I chose a matriarchal bow for this one because along with the max damage charms, it does more DPS overall than a Grand Matron bow. However, aside from doing damage, so 355% enhanced damage, which is a decent chunk. It's doesn't have attack speed on it, and it doesn't have a lot of mods on it to make it really stand out. Yeah, it's got deadly strike and damage to demons, but doesn't have too much on there to you know to give it a good boost performance wise. If you're a strafer though, this is going to be a really cool bow to use because it's got that 100% chance to cast level 18 Bone Spear, which makes it look all pretty cool. But also it's got that 35% chance to cast level 14 amp damage on it. So this is going to be cool in situations where you're coming up against those blow dart guys in Act 3. They're going to be hitting you a lot, or those cool rats in Act 5 as well. So that amp damage is actually going to go off surprisingly often in those situations, but otherwise, if you're doing cow runs and stuff, you're pretty much never going to see this one proc. Overall, I'm going to put this in C tier, and although, well, actually, not although, I think it does even lower damages than all the other ones here, but also it's quite expensive as well. I kind of feel like it's leaning towards a D tier for this one, but I'll just leave it in C tier and see how we go. After that, we've got the Wrath Matriarchal Bow. So where do I begin with this one? Let me just show you. You'll be able to figure it out quite quickly, hopefully. So this is a bow here. Now, it's got a lot of good supporting mods on it, but as you can see, it only does 23 to 54 damage, and that's because it's got no enhanced damage, apart from the 15% that comes with the bow base being superior. So it's quite unfortunate that for Runeworth that's not too cheap, that it's got 0 enhanced damage given to it in addition to the 15% on the bow itself. Having said that, it's got Decrepify, I'll say that again, Decrepify, 30% chance to cast. So that's actually pretty cool. I've used that with multi-shot and it goes off pretty much all the time. It's also got the life tap on there, so you could potentially rock without having life leech anywhere at all. The Decrepify, it does mean that you pretty much do double damage versus anything in Hell, because a lot of stuff in Hell's got 50% physical damage resistance, which Decrepify pretty much wipes it all out and sets it back to 0. It's also got the damage to undead as well as the damage to demons, and it's got Crushing Blow. Yeah, okay. Prevent monster heal as well, and cannot be frozen. Yeah, okay as well. Except you're going to be using Raven Frost anyway, so so I think even despite the Decrepify, the damage is really low. So I really have to give this a D. There's no question. Lastly, we've got the Faith Colossus crossbow. Um, It's not going to be as good as the other faiths up there, just because it's in a crossbow, unfortunately. So crossbows can only shoot as fast as 11 frames per attack. So getting the DPS numbers quite high is going to be pretty much impossible. So this is probably the best as we're going to get for the Faith Colossus crossbow. If you use like a demon crossbow or anything else, you're just going to get the same attack speed here, but lower damage anyway. So there's really not much you can do about it. So sorry to all the crossbow lovers out there, but yeah, unfortunately, this is the best you're going to do attack speed wise. So because of this, it's not going to be your S tier build. I think it sort of struggles to be in an A tier a little bit as well, but it doesn't have that same problem that Windforce and Faith does. So maybe perhaps it could compete on the A tier as well. Yeah, so they're all the builds ranked. So I ranked these earlier, so I actually will just show you these ones as well. So Faith Grand Matron Bow. This is the same as the one that I showed you first, except rather than using Fortitude, we're using this absolutely sick armor here. It's got 418 damage deals inside of there to give it a total of plus 72 damage. So that's plus 72 minimum and plus 72 maximum damage, as well as plus 20 strength. This one does more damage than Fortitude. I've done the math on this, and the character builder does also confirm that as well. So this says 26,000 here versus 24,000. So you can see there's about a, let's call it a 8% damage difference there. The other advantage of this one as well is you could potentially switch out one of these jewels for an attack speed jewel so that you can get a razor tail here to really optimize for 100% pierce and still have good damage. The next one here is the Wind Force. Yes, the Wind Force build here. So we've got the same sort of jeweler's armor here, just using different jewels. So this has got enhanced damage, increased attack speed. So that allows us to actually hit the 8 frames per attack. So we're shooting faster while still retaining a decent amount of enhanced damage on this as well. Once again, very expensive armor. So this one is going to be in the realm of about maybe 10 burr runes to put all of this together. The previous one is going to be a lot more because they're using rare jewels. So this one here, all these yellow jewels are probably going to be something like 50 to 100 jar runes each for these. Without going into too much into the math, basically one of these jewels is so hard to find that it's going to take you just as much time to find one of these jewels as if you were to find a, let's say, I don't know how many of these, like maybe 100 of these jewels. So that just gives you a bit of perspective on how rare those jewels are. And this is already very difficult to find as it is. So that's the Wind Force build here. It's also got a really rare circlet here as well. So you can kind of see like these numbers are pretty ridiculous. So imagine winning the lottery twice 2 weeks in a row. This is the kind of numbers that we're talking about when it comes to being able to find one of these. And then lastly, we've got the rare Grand Matron bow. So this one here is basically, I've spec'd out the mods for these so that it's as close to Wind Force as possible, because this is really the best kind of roll that you can get on this one. And even then, it doesn't quite measure up to being as good as a Wind Force, but it's fairly close. It's more of a trophy room item for this one, but we're still going to give it a whirl anyway. But yeah, you're not going to be able to find all these items. I mean, these two here anyway, they're going to be pretty hard. This one here, it's going to take a lot of time to get this one. It's going to be the most expensive single piece to find other than these two here. Yeah, so they're your S plus tier ones here as well, just quickly covered there. Now, you can see that they do about 8%, 10%, whatever you call it, extra damage on top of these equivalent builds up here. For a build that's going to cost you 10 times more in terms of item wealth to put together. So it's definitely not for the faint of hearted. I think just stick to building out these builds here and you should be more than fine. You should be able to, let's say, do a cow run in about 3 minutes with a build like this. So I think that's perfectly fine. And they're pretty fun to play as well once you get to this kind of level as well, with even this sort of setup with all the faster run walk, max damage, and everything else on there. So yeah, they're all the builds anyway. And I've also listed out my predictions on here as well. So when we actually start testing this and finally get the results, I might actually get some pleasant surprises here. I mean, who knows? But I do think that this prediction is pretty solid because I've actually done some sample tests with these builds, obviously, after uploading the videos on my YouTube channel. Now, just thinking what else I need to cover for these ones. So I've covered the format of the testing, so I'll just briefly show you that again. So players 1 runs, 7 runs each, and then players 8. And then we're going to do the same with a more affordable version of that. And then finally, the S tier builds are going to have players 1, 7 runs each, and players 8, 5 runs each for that. So expect videos for all of those to come up in the weeks and months to come. Once again, I will do some ranking and result videos of all of that. And just like I've done with all of the predictions here and how I've gone into very, very brief detail on each build, I'll actually cover each build a little bit more in depth as I create videos for each one. But otherwise, I think I will soon wrap this video up as there's probably just a couple of other things that I'll cover before I go. So I'm also going to prepare some other videos similar to that strafe video that you guys saw earlier, or hopefully saw earlier. If you haven't seen it, do check it out. It's basically me testing out whether the strafe bug still exists in D2R. So I want to test out other things as well, like, for example, how much attack rating does your build really need? Do you need 100% pierce and all that sort of stuff? So I've got a whole bunch of things that on the backlog that I'm going to prepare some tests and all that sort of stuff for, and then prepare the videos for you guys so that you guys can have a look at that and eventually comment or test those out yourself. Apart from that, yeah, I don't have too much else to add there. So if you've gone all the way to the end of this video, thank you for sticking all the way through. I hope this is kind of like a just a long explainer on what I'm going to do without too much sort of in-game content here. So I know it's a little bit different, but I just wanted to really explain what I've got coming up in the weeks and months to come. Um, Anyway, I hope to start testing this out once the patch actually does come out, but I won't be testing before then. I will also be enjoying playing online in the meantime. Once again, do hit me up if you do play online and want to do some party runs together. Otherwise, we're actually coming up to Monday here, so it's the end of the weekend here for me, but I think for a lot of you guys, it's still the weekend, so I hope you do enjoy the weekend wherever you are, and hopefully I'll see you guys again soon.